Hello, welcome to this early publishing live webinar. My name is Sylvia, and I'm here today with today's speaker, Rob Howard. Hi, Rob. Nice to see you and to be
Hi.
back here with us.
Thanks for
I
having
will
me
be with
again.
you. No, it's my pleasure, our pleasure. I will just get a little bit of your attention just to share some information about this session. I would like just to let you know that the webinar consists of 45 minutes plus about 10-15 minutes of questions and answers. So feel free to write down in the chat box or in the question where there's a space for questions to share any questions you might have, any comments. See the moment, okay? So feel free to ask Rob whatever you want. He will be pleased to get back to you at the end of the session. I will be sitting here at the back, let's say, of this platform, and I will be monitoring your comments, questions, and anything it might occur. Also, you will receive a certificate of attendance by tomorrow afternoon in your email box. So check your email, and it will be released in a PDF format to be downloaded. And just remember to download before the end of this live session the handout, which was put together kindly by our speaker. It's a PDF of this presentation. It would be good for you to have it for your archive, for your study after the presentation, but just remember to download it before the end, before I close this platform today, okay? Then what else? Yes, there will be a recorded video of this session. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, because there we will make sure we will, let you know when we will share this video, okay? And so I don't want to waste any more of your time. So I'm happy now to introduce you to fostering English as a foreign language interpersonal skills to prepare students for global competency with Rob Howard. And I can just say a few words about Rob. I'm sure you all know him. Rob has been in the ELT and EFL sectors for decades. I'm not specifying how many years, but he's got such a long experience, and he's got lots to say and to share with us, definitely. And is at the moment is currently president of IETFL Poland. So enjoy the session, and thank you, Rob, for being here, and thanks to all teachers for following us and staying with us.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for being here, and it's a pleasure to have you. So we'll talk about interpersonal skills, and let's get started. First of all, we have to realize that more and more we're living in a globalized world. I mean, we've said this 20 years ago, but 20 years ago, it was much different. We had maybe one person from one company talking to one person in another company. Oftentimes, those foreign companies would hire a native speaker for that position, or the American company where I came from would hire somebody, let's say, from China. So we didn't have the problem with communication. Now we're living in a world where we're so diverse, you never know from day to day who you're going to talk to, from what country, what their native language is, what their second or third language is. And we really have to be aware that it's a small world after all, as Disney said. So it's no longer in EFL just teaching language. We've seen so many articles lately, we've seen write-ups from the British Council, everybody else, all talking about the World Federation and how things have changed. and how important soft skills are. Some people call them 21st century skills. I like to call them skills we've been doing forever and call them real skills, because more and more it's not just about language, it's about communication. And that's what we're going to talk about. So if you're a general English teacher, like I used to be, we sort of find ourselves getting more and more into interpersonal, intercultural, business English, having all these soft skills like negotiation, adaptability, empathy, and that's what we'll talk about today. So, what's so important these days is not just teaching the standard course book of 20 years ago, where you would have conversations like, on Saturday, I go with Aunt Sally to the shopping mall. You know, this, yes, it's part of an important language skill, but more and more interpersonal skills where we're actually dealing with people that could come from a different culture, could come from a different background of education, could come from different economic level. And we need to be aware of so much more than just the mechanics of putting a sentence together. So the idea when we're preparing our students today, and I think we should do this very early on, definitely high school age, because our high schoolers may not go to university anymore because companies today aren't hiring university graduates. They want the creativity, the young mind of a high school student. But unfortunately, in high school, they're lacking these soft competencies that are needed to get by in business. So for us to do a good service for our students, we can take advantage of using these global skills and competencies in the EFL classroom now to help them for the future. And it's going to be much more relevant to them, especially in these days where you have high school students are becoming entrepreneurs. I just read an article today about a 17-year-old kid still in high school who started a $1.5 million app with AI. So he needs these skills at 17 years old. So in the job market, if you read all these, the World Reports, if you read any of the magazines, The Economist, everything else, Financial Times, what they're all telling is that there's a demand for these skills in the job market, even more than when I entered the job market 250 years ago. Yes, I'm that old. But the thing is, we're better to teach communication skills than when you're teaching English. Because the idea is when we're teaching English, we want them to produce. We want to work on their production. And by working on their production, what this means is we're teaching them how to communicate in a much better and much more eloquent way than just the basic general English course book. And we'll see some examples of that as we go along. So what is global competency? here's a nice little breakdown. It's the ability not only to communicate, but to be able to collaborate and interact effectively in diverse cultural contexts. Now, I've been teaching for many years, and I think back when I was in Brazil, one of my students was telling me she was a director for a large international accounting firm. And they had their weekly conference calls, and they had 12 different countries involved in this conference call with 12 people who 11 of them spoke English as a second language. Only one spoke as their first language, and that was a Texan from the United States. And the funny thing was, he was the most difficult to understand. So we're going to find ourselves as teams become more and more international, especially where we're doing things when you get into IT, working with apps, working with multinational companies, you're going to find yourself basically in a room physically or online with many different cultures all at the same time. So how do you prepare yourself for this? See, because global competency goes far beyond just language fluency. And we know that students are always concerned with this word fluent. Now, fluency, as you probably know it, is not always the most important aspect. A more important aspect, oftentimes, especially in business, is accuracy. And also the ability to not only make yourself understood, but to make sure that you understand the people that are talking to you. And we'll talk about some of the things that you can do to improve this as we go through today's talk. So, what is global competency? It includes cultural awareness, empathy, and especially adaptability. Now, oftentimes we used to say you have to be a chameleon. You have to be able to change, because me as an American in business, which is my background, oftentimes we're very direct, and we can often come across as very aggressive. This isn't very effective, especially when you're dealing with, let's say, Asian countries. Aggression is not very much appreciated, and it actually is hurting any type of collaboration. So we need to be aware of the speaking, the values, and the culture of the people that we're talking to. A perfect example is when you're dealing with a country like India and you ask, do you understand? They will always say yes. And when you ask them to repeat it back to you, they don't. They didn't understand, but in their culture, they feel that they shouldn't say no, that they have to say yes. And this is a roadblock to communication. So one of the things that we can do is, rather than getting upset, we need to empathize and say, you know, I understand. It's hard to understand some of this. Let's work a little bit harder on making sure that we understand each other, because it's very hard to negotiate, very hard to collaborate unless we're both on the same page. And this happens all the time. I deal with professional business people from all over the world, and even sometimes I have trouble getting my communication across. And sometimes I have trouble understanding what they're trying to tell me. So by asking questions, by making sure and reflecting on everything that's decided on important points, and putting ourselves in the shoes of others, here's your empathy and your adaptation. Now, first, let's go back to the hard skills. And if you've been teaching for a while, I'm sure that this is what you've been working with: your grammar, your vocabulary, and your pronunciation. Now, remember, pronunciation is not extremely important because we do have accents. And if we brought everybody in and had a discussion here, because I'm sure you're from all over the world, we all pronounce words differently. We all have this different accent. The point is, in pronunciation, we need to just make sure that we understand the word and get close to the pronunciation to make sure that our interlocutor is understanding what we're saying. Grammar becomes a little less important because nobody is sitting there correcting exactly what you're saying. And most of the time, I feel we're dealing with speaking over writing. Writing gives you the opportunity to check things, maybe run it through Grammarly, check it with any kind of translation or even ChatGPT to see if it's well written. So grammar can be fixed, but in a conversation, it becomes a little more difficult. But again, if we use reflexive questioning to make sure that we understood, we have communication. Now, I'll give you a great example of two words, and I've been teaching this to my students for years. And before that, I actually taught it to my salespeople, the word can and can't. Because when you're speaking quickly, depending on the accent, depending on the pronunciation, sometimes it's hard to hear the difference between can and can't. It can make a big difference in a negotiation. So what we want to do is teach our students, instead of using the word can't, use cannot. And this is just one example of how we can change the vocabulary and the grammar to get a better result in communication. So let's talk a little bit about the interpersonal skills. What they include is active listening, emotional intelligence, again, adaptability to support effective communication. Now, what do we mean by active listening? Now, active listening is really the importance of making sure that you understand what the person is saying and responding appropriately to what it is they've said. Now, oftentimes, what you'll find yourself doing, if you're not sure, ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. It's better to ask, did you mean this rather than continuing on the conversation or the collaboration with a mistake. So active listening, there's a very good book written by Daniel Kahneman that says we tend to be lazy listeners and we fill in the blanks and we assume what people are going to say, and we do that ourselves. This is a problem. So active listening, we really need to pay attention to what's being said. And I recommend, if it's a very important point, we teach them to make sure with a reflexive question. Things like, so what you're saying is, if I understand correctly, it's this. Do you mean this? Very easy. And it actually gives the person you're speaking with much more confidence because they know that you're really listening and really intent on understanding the point they're trying to make. Now, let's move on. Why are the soft skills so important? Because most people, depending on the job, they're going to go into some type of international work. Maybe it'll be travel, or it could just be social. Oftentimes, you find yourself dealing with not only the professional language, but also the socializing, finding out how to get around through travel, as I've been doing a lot lately. And I just came back from Spain and I had a lot of questions using my Portuguese. I kind of got by, but I was very lucky because the people I spoke with would say, no, the word you're trying to say is this, which I thought was wonderful. So soft skills can make a big influence on your students' success in the future. Oftentimes, and I would say 10 to 15 years ago when I was teaching in Brazil, I was very surprised to be working with business professionals who had probably reached at least B2, but in some cases C1 and even C2, and they didn't have cultural skills, the empathy skills, the collaboration skills to properly communicate, even though they had the vocabulary, the grammar, excellent pronunciation. And this is what I've been concentrating on for years because I've been teaching communication skills, as I said, for 100 years. Now, we talked about understanding and responding appropriately. How do we do it? Through the active listening, through going through reflexive questions. I always recommend practicing this in a classroom environment through role playing. And what I tell my students is be as outrageous as you want. You know, you don't have to say something normal. In fact, if you say something out of the ordinary, even better, because then you're forcing the interlocutor to ask a reflective question to find out exactly how they should respond because of what it is you've said. Now, emotional intelligence will help you with the cultural diversity that you have in different situations. Realize that we're dealing with so many different cultures. We can say the wrong thing dealing with some cultures. I tend to be kind of comical and funny. I'm not today, but normally I like to joke around a lot. Oftentimes, it's either disrespectful to the person I'm speaking to, or they just don't understand what it is I'm trying to say because it's outside of the normal conversation that I would have. So we need to learn a little bit about the cultures, and working with the books, studying the cultures, understanding a little bit about what you're up against, what you can and cannot say is very important. And this is all part of emotional intelligence. And adjusting your language behavior in different contexts. For example, if I'm talking with someone in one of the Asian countries, I tend to be much more professional. I tend to speak a little slower and a little more deliberate. And I have the flexibility that if I need to, I bring my level of vocabulary down depending on their level of English or maybe just their level of understanding. So this is a key interpersonal skill. And we haven't taught this based on the general English course book. But the good news is, here at LE Publishing, this is in the new books. It's understanding different cultures and giving effective communication skills based on different cultures around the world. So it's great. You have a book now that you can work with. A little bit of a commercial, but this is something that 10, 20 years ago, we were dying to find things like this. Books that dealt with cultural awareness in the regular English class. So we need to see how cultural insights shape the language use and how the interactions are. For instance, if I was having a conversation with another native speaker, there's a good chance we would be talking over each other and interrupting each other all the time. It's our culture to speak this way. I noticed being in Spain, the Spanish are both talking at the same time and very fast. How they understand each other, I don't know. But we can get this cultural overload if we are not cognizant of what their reality is. So we need to be aware of their reality and make the adjustment language-wise to get proper communication. Now, the best way we can do this is simulations and role-playing activities using real-life scenarios. Most students come to class with a background. It could be the culture is different from their other classmates, or you can have them put themselves in the position of maybe their parents, because more likely their parents might have different backgrounds. And what you can do is getting them to think about how they interact with somebody else, playing the role of a different person, helps to give them the confidence that they can empathize and use these soft skills in everyday life. Role-playing simulation, it's probably the strongest thing that you can do to work with your students to get them practicing and get them comfortable. Another thing, working on collaborative projects. This helps working with teamwork because most likely when people enter the job force, they're going to be working on a team. Excuse me. And there's a good chance, excuse me, there's a good chance that there could be quite a diverse group in that class. One of the committees I used to work with, I worked with 10 different people from 8 different cultures. And oftentimes, even though we were all teachers of communication skills in business English, we had trouble. So we immediately found, what's the best thing to do? Go back, reflexive questioning. So problem solving is a great way of doing this. Come up with a situation, and you'll see here in the book, it's giving you some problem solving exercises that you can practice and take it even further. So what this does is it allows you not only to learn new things, to learn new culture, but it teaches you how to interact and how to respond with whoever you are on the team. So collaborate. I always like to come up with scenarios, and each person in the team would have a different position, let's say in the company. So one might say, oh, this is a great idea, but the other one says, well, it's not legal. The other one says, well, you know, we have to be worried about this price. And when you work with this collaboration, it gives you a bigger picture of not only what the problem is, but what the team dynamic is. And out of that will come better communication skills. Now, peer feedback. This is very important to work with in your classroom, and you have to build this from the very beginning. And if you're working in a classroom, it's very important to make your students feel safe. You have to be in a safe, collaborative space. So mistakes are welcome because everybody's going to make mistakes. They shouldn't be laughed at. They shouldn't be put down because peers should be helping each other rather than you having to step in. When I worked with my teens, right from the beginning, I worked hard to build a community where everybody felt safe and they had the confidence to be able to make a mistake. And the other students who might have known the proper answer didn't feel bad helping them with correction, giving them some feedback. So this is something that you build, this supportive environment right from the beginning, because rather than me as the teacher correcting all the time, peer correction and peer feedback is much stronger because they can relate better. And you'll find, again, this comes out of role playing. people will give feedback and take a little bit of time after the project and go over a reflection of the whole activity, how the language was, where some mistakes might have been. Also, bringing realia, and this is authentic, real world cases. One of the things you can do is the news. You know, in the old days, I used to bring in a newspaper. Now it's hard to find a newspaper, but there's plenty of media, there's plenty of news on social media, there's plenty happening there where you can bring in real world problems, real world dialogues, and even case studies. I recommend you start off in high school with case studies where you look at something that happened in a situation, read through it, and then make it a project to discuss exactly what happened. This is also going to help with critical thinking skills, which sadly we don't do enough of these days. Discussions are always great. And again, it's important that you foster this community of safe, comfortable confidence, that people aren't afraid to say their mind. Debates are wonderful if you can do it. This can be difficult in some cultures. For example, I can use debating in the United States. We grow up debating. A lot of cultures in the East here, they're used to debating. That's how they do their role playing. That's how they do their discussions. In Brazil, they just could not grab the concept of debating because you're putting yourself into a different position, and it was difficult, but you teach them. And it's through open-ended communication and active listening. That means not just asking yes, no questions, you know, asking questions that get more information. Storytelling. Everybody's got a story. Most people have a lot of stories. I could tell you stories for years. I should write a book. But what storytelling does is not only will it help you practice telling your story, but it also gets you to reflect on your own personal narrative. And by doing this, you realize how human you can be. And this helps with empathy. Reflection is important. And I didn't often see this with high school age students throughout school. It was basically, let's do the assignment and then move on. Maybe we corrected, okay, this is wrong, that's the right answer. But nobody ever stopped and took the time to say, why is it the right answer? This is reflection. Integrating technology. Now, this can be wonderful because if, let's say, you're sitting here like in Poland, where I am, and you happen to be someone who's never left Poland, and you're going to have to do some business and communication with, let's say, China. There's technology. Take a listen with YouTube. Start off with YouTube. Start off with social media. Listen to people. Listen to their attitude. Listen to how they talk. And then get them to start using conferencing tools like we are here or even Zoom. In the early days, I used to use this thing called ICQ. That shows how old we are. This is way before Skype. And what it did is it allowed me to talk with people all over the world. Back then it was just typing. And then later we had voice. Afterwards we had video. But what it allowed me to do was talk to people from all over the world, learn a little bit about their culture, learn about what was interesting to them. And then I would recommend something that I did when I was in Brazil is I connected with a school in Germany, same grade, same age kids, and we started by sending little video messages back and forth, and then we started with video conferencing tools, and they talked about the reality of their life. If you're dealing with adults, start using some of the productivity apps like you've got, now I can't remember any of them. You've got Kanban, you've got Mira. These are business applications where people will work together as groups through an app. So it's a different type of communication, but when they get into the real world and they start working, they're most likely going to be working with these productivity apps. You may have Teams, you may have Google Workspace, there's all different ones. Zoom has Workplace now. So there's a lot of productivity apps and a lot of conferencing tools that you can use for free, and maybe reach out and find a teacher maybe that's here today and connect with someone else and see if you can connect yourselves and even your classes. Now, challenges and some of the potential problems. Time. We never have enough time. We never get enough teacher training. Sometimes there is cultural resistance. There are certain things that you just cannot talk about in certain cultures. And this is something that you'll have to learn, but make them aware of it in the classroom. The biggest thing, creating that supportive learning environment, make them feel safe and comfortable, and prioritize interpersonal skills as part of their language teaching. And this is what you need to do more than anything else, is get them to open up to others. Best way you do it is by modeling. The first thing I do with my students is I open up about myself. And I've always felt, teachers used to say, oh, don't open up about yourself. You're not their friend, you're their teacher. But if you expect a student to open up their life to you and to their classmates, you have to be willing to open up your own life to them. And this will help to build the interpersonal skills just by being closer to them, learning nonverbal communication, and being confident. So, with that, I would like to thank Ellie Publishing, number one, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, but number two, for the great books. And I wish I had had these years ago, because really these will give you the skills that you should be helping your students with now. It's not just about language and talking, because we're entering a new world and we're getting more involved with AI. We're getting more involved with dealing with every culture in the world. So there. And I even did 45 minutes. So thank you so much. So what I'd like to do is hear your comments and questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. Yes, I've got, let's start with the first question, okay?
Should I stop sharing?
As you wish, yes. So I've got a question from teacher Tracy. We can still see your screen, huh?
Okay, I gotta. There we go.
Okay.
So now, yep.
Teacher
So
Tracy, yes. So she's asking, okay, it's always a matter of timing. Preparing a lesson, develop vocabulary and grammar structures for the different language program or syllabus. It doesn't allow me to manage much time to develop skills other than the language ones. Any help, any tips?
you're preparing a class that you have to work with, let's say, conditionals, just for argument's sake. So you've got to do the preparation anyway. Why don't you tailor that question and the work that they're going to do to have a discussion of, well, what if I lower the price, make it into negotiation skills? What if we were to give this in exchange for that? You know, so it's just a matter of being a little creative and changing the type of question that you're going to use. So instead of, you know, if we go out to dinner, do we have pizza? Make it a business question.
Give another context. That's what you're suggesting then.
Exactly. Because what this will do is it's not only teaching them how to use the conditional properly in the language, but now it's giving them a little bit of a negotiation skill where they're working back and forth, and you know, it makes it into more of a conversation. If I just ask the question, if we go out tonight, should we have pizza or Chinese? That's almost a closed-end question. It's going to be Chinese. Where's the discussion? So, you know, rethink what you're using for examples. That would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. So we're seeing timing as a first, you know, let's say obstacle for some teachers. And then there's this other obstacle, which is the lower level of English, the lower level of the language knowledge, because
Right.
you suggested many, you know, scenario for, you know, I don't know, peer activity, discussion, negotiation, or collaboration. But some students are very shy and they're not very sociable. Or on the other way, some students who can speak very good English are not very nice, like sharing their knowledge.
Mm-hmm. This is where I always find electric shock works well. And no, I'm kidding. What I used to do, you know, I had the same scenarios in Brazil when I was teaching teens there. And I remember I had this one girl who every time we went and we asked her a question, she's like, you know, she wanted to crawl inside herself and die. The funny thing that I did is I gave them a homework assignment of going home and making a short video about what they do in their free time. And they came back to class and they showed the videos. And this girl spoke as well as I did. And after that, the rest of the class, I won't say it's bullying, it was more peer pressure. They would not let her get away with this shy stuff anymore. when they realized she could speak. Sometimes they just need a little push, and maybe it means that they do something away from everybody else and record it. Once they see that they have success, I still talk with this girl. This is 20 some odd years later. This shy little thing, and she was a little short thing. She ended up joining the drama club and started doing
Wow.
theater, went to law school, and she's now a judge in Brazil.
Wow.
And this is the girl that would not talk for almost 6 months. There's always a way to draw them out, find what it is. And with teaching teens, I think so often what we don't do is we just say, oh, she's shy, and we let it go at that. Don't do it. Find a way to get through to them. Another thing I used to do is if I had that real smart aleck who was not very nice, and then I had the very weak student, I'd always put them together in pairs. And I always said, your success is based on their success. And surprisingly, the smartass would calm down, realize and feel pretty good about himself because he was able to bring that other person up. And this is it. And this is how you build a good collaborative community. One other extreme thing I did was I had one student who was older than the rest of the teens. He really wanted to speak. He just was so afraid of making mistakes and looking stupid because he was older. So one day I gave them an assignment. I said, we're going to have a discussion about, let's say, pens, anything. I want you to get into these groups, and the first thing you do is I want you to discuss everything about pens in L1. And everybody was like, oh, L1, but teacher, we're not allowed to talk in L1. And I said, do it. You got 10 minutes, but when you make your presentation, it's got to be in L2. Who led the group? He did. He did it in L1. And when, after he did that, it built up his confidence. And when they said, okay, who's going to make the presentation in L2? He jumped up and said, I will. And the funny thing was, it's the first time I've ever seen a class ask for a dictionary. Because, they were looking, like, let's say the word tip, they didn't know how to say it in English. And they asked for a dictionary. Never saw students ask for a dictionary before.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of different ways. I don't do it all the time, but it was just the right spark to get that person going. And that's all it took.
Thank you. Well, you teachers, I think have got such an easy job, like to uncover talent also. So it's not only a matter of teaching,
Yeah, it's
Okay.
really, when you talk about empathy, we really need to have empathy for our students.
Yeah.
I can really empathize because I'm trying to learn Polish, and God, am I a horrible student. But it's not easy. And remember, Jeremy Harmer said this to me years ago. He said, remember, we were all once a second language learner. And as teachers, I think we forget that sometimes.
We tend to forget, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this very practical and useful, inspiring workshop. We have so many comments and positive feedback from our teachers. Thanks to our teachers as well. And I think we have reached now an end of this workshop. I just would like to remind our participants to first download the PDF of this presentation before I close this platform. So you've still got time. Go under documents or materials and you will be able to find a PDF to download. And then I'm also sad to say that this is the last series, the last webinar of this series for the moment, though, because I'm already thinking about organizing new ones in the next future. Okay, so bear with us, follow us, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And thanks, Rob. Thanks a lot for being with us, and I'll see you very soon.
Yep, and thanks everybody for coming by, and I hope it helps.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye now.